Hello, I am Davina, and hello to all of you, very bold, beautiful, brilliant, and evolving souls. Today, I am going to talk about flashbacks. And in particular, I'm going to talk about three aspects. First, just what are they exactly? Secondly, what are some of the challenges of flashbacks? And thirdly, how do we manage the flashbacks? So, CPTSD, one of the major symptoms or issues with having CPTSD is emotional flashbacks. And for me, it's pretty much everything in my life is a flashback. So I do feel like if you can understand flashbacks, it's a huge thing to helping you just manage your life and manage your days a little bit better. Um, but first of all, it is important to understand that flashbacks are not your fault and that they are an involuntary like reaction, like a response. And it's important to understand that you cannot prevent flashbacks from happening. They will inevitably happen. This is part of the healing process. As hellish and grueling as it is to go through these flashbacks, it is the flashbacks that can bring us the healing. So, number one, what are they? What is an emotional flashback? Um, it is a reliving of your childhood abuse and neglect through intense emotions, through bodily sensations. So basically, you're viscerally re-experiencing your childhood. And I think in many cases, they are purely emotional. I don't know. I've heard that some people have a visual. I do not have any visual at all. So it's just purely what I'm feeling. Um, and these flashbacks, of course, are triggered by things around us, by it could be something in our environment. It could be something as simple as a sight, a sound. It could be triggered by someone's behavior, by an event, or even just our general life situation can be an entire flashback on its own. So flashbacks can be very long and extended. You can really have like, a one flashback of abandonment, and you can also have additional triggers on top of that, which are causing flashbacks. So they can happen, in my experience anyway, in many layers. There's just tons and tons of layers of flashbacks happening all the time. And sometimes I can't even tell when one slides into another, or if there's two going on, or three, or 10, I don't know. Um, so yeah, they just sort of spontaneously occur. And Pete Walker describes them as an amygdala hijacking. So it's part of your brain, I think it's back here somewhere, where it's kind of the emotional um, part of your brain. So you suddenly go into this very high emotional state um, where you have intense feelings of shame, of self-blame, fear, sadness, um, of course, anger, rage, hopelessness, helplessness, loneliness, and they can feel like, I mean, it feels like it's happening right now. Like it feels like, and that is what can make them so tricky, is that it's hard to separate. It's like having a sort of a hallucination. You think it's actually, happening because of something in your present, but it's really emotions from the past coming up. So these repressed emotions from your childhood um, are triggered by something in your world or even in your thoughts too. It can be an internal trigger, but don't blame yourself for that. So you're triggered, and then the emotions arise from your subconscious, from where they've been repressed for years or decades or however long that those feelings were repressed for. because your whole childhood you had to repress feelings from your consciousness. You had to dissociate from your emotions to get through your childhood. And when you have these intense feelings, they, of course, then send you into dysregulation. You're just in a state of dysregulation. And generally, the polyvagal theory is that you're either going to be in a hyper arousal state or a hypo arousal state. So, the hyper arousal is the fight and the flight, um, and the hypo arousal is more like the flop, where you collapse, you shut down. And I believe what I've heard is freeze is sort of somewhere in the middle, has both elements of the hyper arousal and the hypo arousal. So, um, yeah, it's that kind of, well, I have a video on those two, so you can check that out further if you want to go further into that. And for me, fawn is all the time. So fawning is like, it's always right under the surface. So I'm not exactly sure if that's different for other people. Maybe some people are in fawn and maybe sometimes not in fawn. I think I'm pretty much always in fawn. Um, and that, so to me, is both hyperarousal and hypoarousal as well. So that is what a flashback is in a nutshell. And of course, they can range from subtle to excruciating. They can range from short to very long. Um, and yeah, obviously extremely painful. The second thing is, so what are the challenges of dealing with flashbacks? And what I've found is that first of all, it's fully believing that we are actually in a flashback because we can just sort of carry on and sort of push our way through the day because we have to deal with our adult stuff, but also because of the shame and the self-blame and the denial. I call these kind of the trio of um, you know, making us helping us or not helping us, sort of making us not believe that this is what happened to us, you know? So it's important to, when you're in a flashback, to say out loud, you know, I'm in a flashback. And you might have to say it a few times. I'm in a flashback. Like, really get it to sink in. Like, I'm in a flashback because I was abused in my childhood and I have C-PTSD. I know I have to go through this like almost every day. And sometimes at the end of the day, I'm like, oh my God, I've been in a flashback the whole day and didn't really fully acknowledge it, you know? Um, so that's okay. It's very, very hard. But that is just one of the biggest challenges is really realizing that this is a flashback. This is I'm re-experiencing my past hell from my childhood. Um, Another one can be the subtlety of the flashbacks. Like they can be so subtle that you don't really think that it's a flashback, but it is. You know, the fear can sometimes, you know, go to a lower range where you just think, well, I'm a little bit on edge or I'm a little bit stressed out. You know, I think a lot of people use the word stress, but stress is terror, really. I think stress is terror. I'm in a flashback right now, by the way, just to let you know. Um, but yeah, the subtlety, you know, the shame can be so subtle you don't even know you're in it. Um, you know, a lot of these elements can be so sneaky and so like um yeah, just so subtle. Another problem is that we tend to gaslight ourselves because that's what our parents taught us to do, right? So we minimize it. Oh, you know, it's not that bad, or I'm not really frightened, or I shouldn't feel this way. That's a huge one, I think, that can be, again, really just in the background, um, where you're part of your brain or part of your mind is saying, you know, I shouldn't feel sad. I shouldn't feel angry. I shouldn't feel this scared. Why am I feeling this scared? So it kind of goes back also to the denial of actually being in a flashback. Um, so we can kind of we can end up minimizing our pain and thinking, you know, oh, it's not that bad or whatever. Another one is, and this was a big one for me in the beginning of my journey, was thinking that I should be able to get out of a flashback. I always like I shamed my added extra layers of shame because, I thought I should be able to get out of this. Like, why can't I get out of this flashback? So it's really important to know that it's not your fault. And in my opinion, there's not a lot you can do. You can definitely manage them, make them more manageable. You can sit with them, but you cannot prevent the onset of a flashback. It's not your fault that it's happening, and there isn't really a way to like get out of it. You can feel the feelings and move through the flashback, but there's no way to like really snap yourself out of it. I mean, sometimes, in my experience, if I have, if I say the right thing to my inner child, there might, be a slight decrease or, just maybe doing one thing to ground myself, might diminish it or something, but it doesn't necessarily help you get out. So, um, don't make that your goal. And the last one here I have is just feeling completely overtaken, overwhelmed by a flashback. It's very difficult to deal with a flashback when you are just consumed, right? When you can't, like, as I said, can't even say I'm in a flashback because I'm so dysregulated or I'm so dissociated that I can't even recognize how much I'm struggling, how much I'm in pain. Um, so these are some of the challenges. And now, what can we do to manage them at least a little bit? Um, I think the number one thing is to get yourself grounded or as grounded as possible. Um, and I do have a video on that, but I'll list a few. Body scans, yoga nidra is a great way to get yourself grounded. Doing some stretching, doing some yoga, having a bath. I have acupressure mats that I use that have been very helpful. What else did I say? Just like walking on the ground outside, like what do they call it? Earthing, walking in some sand or something. And breathing techniques can work as well. I know for some people it's not been a big thing for me, more so as I'm getting more healed because in the beginning there's so much pain here. There's so much pain going on in your chest, in your belly that you may not want to focus on your breathing. It might be way too difficult, so don't even force yourself to go there. That's why I found yoga nidra and body scanning to be a much more accessible way to get in touch with my body. And just recognizing like if you're an intense flashback, okay, my hands are feeling okay. I'm feeling okay in my hands right now. How are my feet? Okay, my feet. Okay, I can feel my feet. Is there any pain in my feet? There's no emotional pain in my feet. Okay. So you can recognize the parts of your body that are feeling okay, and that can sometimes help a little bit. I have a couple of kind of acronyms that I use. One is called the 5 H's, and this can come in really handy, especially like if you're at work and you can't do like full body scan, or obviously you can't have a bath. The 5 H's stand for heels, hips, head, hands, and heart. So it's just a way to quickly recognize those points in your body, get an idea of your body in space. So heels, hips, head, hands, heart. That actually was really grounding for me just right now as I was doing it. Um, and I have another acronym that I use, and that's called ALIVE. I have a video on that. So the A is for allow, acknowledge and allow. So acknowledge that you're in a flashback and try to allow it. Just try to let it be. L is for love. Give yourself unconditional love. Just like I love you just as you are. I love you no matter what. I love you through and through. Let your inner child know that it doesn't matter how she's feeling, how he's feeling right now, that it's okay and that, you love him, her as they are. I is for identify. Identify and name the feelings that you're feeling. And for me, I tend to notice that there's maybe one dominant feeling or maybe two or three kind of dominant feelings. So try to name, what is kind of the dominant feeling. And if you're verbally ventilating, it can become very easy to identify what you're feeling. Because as soon as you start speaking, you go, oh, this is anger, or oh, this is sadness, or, oh, this is fear. So it can really help to verbally ventilate. So naming those feelings, especially shame. I feel ashamed, or I feel despicable, or I feel like a loser. It just gives you that separation that you are not the feeling, that you're identifying a feeling that you're having, and the feeling will pass. Or pass is kind of a, anyway. V is for validate. Validate your feelings. So make sure, and this is all difficult. Like healing's really a mess. I mean, it's not this clear cut ever, but V is for validate. So of course you're feeling angry. Of course you're feeling infuriated. Your parents ignored you. Your parents shamed and scolded you. Of course you're feeling infuriated. Or like you can use the trigger that's happening. Of course you're feeling scared right now. You're going to an interview. Of course you're feeling terrified. Um, so just like, of course, or it's understandable you're feeling that way, or it makes sense that you're feeling that way. These are validating statements. And E is for empathy. Um, Make sure that if you can anyway, I guess if you can is a better way, if you're able to even like muddle yourself out of a flashback enough to give yourself empathy. This is actually very, very difficult. So but maybe write down a statement on your desk or something. I can imagine how hard it is for you, or I can imagine how painful that is for you, Donna. Donna's my inner child. So, if you just put your hands on your heart or give yourself a hug, I can imagine how horrifying that is for you, Donna, and try to imagine what your child is going through. Like maybe try to picture a scene. If you don't have a visual, try to picture a scene that might be happening. Imagine that your mother is yelling at you, or imagine that your father is insulting you, or something like that. So you can imagine what that child feels like, that small child. So those are alive. So again, it's acknowledge and allow, love, identify feelings, validate, and empathize. And of course, there's also Pete Walker's 13 Steps. If you haven't read Pete Walker's book, I absolutely recommend it. It has been the number one resource for me. And he has 13 steps, and 13 is a lot, if you're in a flashback. I love you, Pete Walker. You probably saved my life, but 13 is a lot. So if you want to like make your own steps, shrink it down to like 5 or even 3, if you can just even think of 3 things you can do in a flashback. And acronyms have helped me a lot. Just so that, because when we're in a flashback, it's very difficult when you're dysregulated to regulate yourself. It's the more dysregulated you are, the harder it is to regulate. So be in all of this, just be so very, very gentle and patient. Often when I'm in a flashback, you know, I couldn't even do the 5 H's because I'm so lost. I'm so gone. I'm just like, like, and that's another thing I think I didn't mention, but when you have your amygdala hijacked, it also extremely impairs your executive functioning. So just realize that this is also not your fault. If you're feeling like you can't even hardly think or do things that other adults do, it's because you are so incredibly dysregulated, and that this is just what your brain does. Um, in a flashback. So bring a lot of compassion to all of this. Healing is a messy, extremely difficult thing to do. So even though I say these things in a very clear-cut way, This is my day. I don't just sit here and go, oh, wow, I am in a flashback and I'm going to do a live right now. Like it just doesn't work like that. It's just, I'm usually scrambling to, so it's good to have routines. Have routines. For example, at the end of my day, I have a bath and then I lay on my acupressure mat and then I get into bed and I do my yoga nidra. So it's one time a day where I have this sort of sequence to follow. So, having routines or rituals are a great way to help you with flashbacks as well. I hope this has been helpful. Yeah, flashbacks are obviously a huge, huge part of CPTSD. In fact, kind of like the only part in a way, because every symptom of CPTSD, I believe, is kind of an element of being in a flashback. So be very gentle and compassionate with yourself. And again, that is difficult too. So when in doubt, just breathe. And I'm wishing you so many blessings on your journey of healing and awakening. And I am Davina at Boldness Blooming. Thank you for watching.